My brain just went, oh, power down.
Hey, it's Sue.
And Megan, the Spine Breakers. And today we are going to do part 1 of a 2-part July wrap-up because we have been reading machines.
Yeah.
Killing it.
Yeah, and first off, we do want to mention that we originally planned to do a reading rush wrap-up. However, in light of some recent things, we decided not to do that.
Yeah. Reading rush was just not a good look this year in a lot of different ways.
It really wasn't.
So we're going to forego that wrap-up.
Yeah.
And probably that readathon. Like, in general.
Yeah. And while we do our wrap-up, for part 1 of our wrap-up, we shall be drinking Good Behavior Crushable IPA from Odell Brewing Company. And I didn't realize when I bought this that this is like a low-cal IPA. It says it has 110 calories and is a 4% ABV, so it's also a little bit low ABV. Which, after knowing that, I was a little bit, didn't like the name of it. Because I don't think that you should feel guilty for what you eat or drink, and the name Good Behavior kind of implies that.
Because it's low-cal, you're on your best behavior.
You're being good.
Yeah. Which is kind of garbage, but it's fine.
But anyway, let's try the beer.
Let's try the beer.
It's really, it's a pretty decent IPA. I do think it feels like it seems a little weak.
Yeah, it's a little watered down, kind of.
Yeah, but it still has, a nice hoppy flavor, I think.
It does, and then there's kind of, an aftertaste of, some fruity, maybe, a tropical or, a peachy. It says tropical peach on the back.
It says tropical fruit and juicy peach.
So there is kind of a fruity aftertaste, but yeah, the whole, overall flavor is a little bit watered down, but it's not bad.
But it's really not bad. And, I do think it's kind of nice that there's a lot of these, low-cal craft beer options lately, especially IPAs, and, that's nice if you enjoy craft beer, but maybe you don't enjoy all the calories.
Yeah, for people
to have
who
an
are
option.
being mindful of that, to have an option, I think that's cool.
So I'm not even drunk yet.
No, we've had a beer. We've each had one beer.
So in an attempt to hopefully make this less confusing.
Yes.
We're first, instead of talking about the books in order, we're first going to talk about the books we both read this month, so we can talk about them together, and then we'll talk about some of the books that we read individually this month. And mention that we've been doing Tome Infinity and Beyond.
And Fuckathon.
This month. So these books have been for 2 different readathons as well.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Okay. So let's dive in and let's talk first about An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. First of all, what did you rate it? What did you think?
Should we describe what it's about first?
Well, fuck me. Yes, we probably should. So, An Unkindness of Ghosts is about this. It's kind of like a colonized spaceship. It's set up very much like the South during slave times. So the spaceship has different levels to it. The lower tiers are devoted to, I think they're referred to as indentured servants, and I'm putting that in heavy sarcastic quotes because we all know that means slave. But the people on the upper levels of the ship are the elite,
and
they're white, and the folks down below are black or black or brown.
Right.
And so there's this woman who is one of the slaves. She also has autism. And she starts to discover some things about the ship and about its past and the way it functions.
Yeah.
And she kind of figures out a way to change things, but it's going to require her to do a lot.
And I really, really enjoyed this, and I believe I gave it 4 stars.
I also gave it 4 stars, and I also very much enjoyed it.
Yeah. And there's definite content warnings. Here.
Oh yeah,
lots of
There's lots of rape and sexual assault.
Yeah.
So
and just
big
violence
trigger warning
in general.
And definitely racially motivated violence, and so definite trigger warnings there.
I don't know what else to say about it other than it was super good.
Yeah, I really
very engrossing.
Super engrossing, and I liked. So the main character has autism, and I feel like River Solomon did a really good job of portraying a character with autism in a way that was not in any way demeaning or belittling. It did, I mean, River Solomon did kind of showcase some of the interpersonal difficulties somebody that with autism may have.
Right.
But the main character is very much a strong individual and a strong person and is the hero of the story.
Right.
You know, the one driving it. So I think, you know, that was pretty cool.
I also liked that even though she does go by she, her in the story, she's like kind of non-binary.
Yeah, and there is another character who is explicitly non-binary, which is pretty cool.
The only thing about it that I didn't like was that I felt like the ending wasn't satisfying.
Not remotely. Yeah,
and so I really hope
even a little bit.
I really hope that there's a sequel to this. I don't know if there's one planned or anything, but I hope there is because I would definitely read a sequel.
Oh yeah,
and I would love some closure on some things.
Yes. Yeah, so I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, that ending was just kind of like,
Yeah.
But, and one thing that I did learn, I believe River Solomon uses they, them pronouns, and I have referred to River Solomon as a she in past videos, so my apologies for using the wrong pronouns there. But yeah, I do believe River Solomon goes by they, them.
And should we say what challenges we counted this for?
We should.
For Tome Infinity and Beyond, I counted this for read a book with a star on the cover or in the title. There's little stars all over it.
I also counted it for that challenge.
And then I counted it for read a book promoting diversity in science fiction. Lots of diversity in this book.
And I counted it for a book with space travel.
And then I also counted it for a book with space travel. And for Fuckathon, I counted this for fuck ableism.
Same.
And for fuck white
fuck
supremacy.
White supremacy. Also same. Yeah. So what are we talking about next?
How about The AI Who Loved Me?
Yes.
By Alyssa Cole. So The AI Who Loved Me is a sci-fi romance. It's, you know, more heavy on the romance. It's definitely a romance novel. But it's about a woman who, she meets this man in her building. And he's a very strange man. But they seem like drawn to each other.
Yeah.
And maybe they fall in love.
Maybe they do.
And maybe he's a robot.
Maybe he is. God, all the good ones are either taken or robots, you know. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars.
I gave it 4. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was fun, and like, I'm not a person who traditionally enjoys romance, because I tend to think it's silly. And this story was like a little bit silly, but it was not silly in a bad way. It was like, it was really fun.
Yeah.
Like, it was a fun
And
story.
I was not expecting the amount of like dystopian and conspiracy intrigue that was in it.
Which was really cool. Yeah.
Which it is definitely still more focused on the romance. Like, it doesn't go into like extreme detail or
There's
anything.
no deep dive in there.
Yeah. I feel like it was like exactly what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep, it was. And I wish, you had said this and I agree, like, I wish there was a little bit more sexy time in it.
Oh yeah. For sure.
There was
like
big
one
sex
scene.
scene.
Which I've read an Alyssa Cole book before, and it also only had like one sex scene in it, which maybe I just read too much like erotica fan fiction that's just like straight up porn basically.
Well.
So I'm just like, that was it?
I could have done with some more sex. But I will say the big sex scene was like, it was well written. As awkward as I am about sex scenes in books, it did not make me uncomfortable. It was good to read. I liked it. So yeah, it was a cute little romance. I dug.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. And I counted it for Tome Infinity and Beyond for a book set on Earth. A book that is not talked about or under 5,000 ratings, which I actually think that now it is over 5,000 ratings on Goodreads, but at the time that I chose it for this
It wasn't.
challenge, I don't think it was, but I probably read something else this month that was under it, but anyway. And then I also counted it for read a book featuring robots or androids.
And I counted it for that challenge and also the read a sci-fi novella.
And then for Fuckathon, I counted it for fuck book elitism.
Same. So next up is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, which I don't have a physical copy of because I listened to it.
Same.
But that is a sci-fi novel about the gentrification of cities, but with an extraterrestrial element. So like, cities are being gentrified, but kind of at the like extraterrestrials are kind of driving or encouraging that gentrification to happen because it helps them to take over the city. Because
was it extraterrestrials or was it like sort of a parallel
yeah,
universe?
That was kind of weird. It was like a parallel universe. Like there's other universes and other cities. So yeah, I think it was more of like a parallel universe situation. But so cities basically have their living, and they have an avatar or multiple avatars. So are humans that have taken on an element of the city itself. And so it's about these people who've discovered that they are avatars of New York.
Yeah, like the different boroughs in New York.
Yeah, and so they discover that New York is in peril and they have to kind of join up and help save the city so it doesn't die.
Yeah, and I, again, really enjoyed this
Loved
one.
it.
And I thought the audiobook was great. Like, the person who did the audiobook, let me look up what their name was. But they did a great job.
Super well done. Yeah, like the audiobook, the production value of it was incredible. There was some cool, like sound effects and just kind of like vocal effects that happened throughout different parts of it, and it was just very well done.
And the narrator did like different accents and stuff throughout, and they did a really good job. So the narrator is Robin Miles, so I definitely would recommend the audiobook. But yeah, I really liked it. I think my only issue with it was like there's one borough that they just like give up on.
They're like, fuck it.
And, like, I guess I understand why, but I was kind of like, I feel like they could have at least maybe tried a little harder, but I don't know. I guess maybe the point is, like, some people are just not worth your time and energy.
Or, like, some people are so committed to their course of action or belief system or whatever that you just gotta let them do it. Yeah, I did too. I gave it 4 to 5 stars. My only beef with it was like, pretty inclusive. Like, there were, LGBT plus characters in it. But I did feel like there was a character in it who is trans, and they were in it, like, very briefly, and then you never hear about them again.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird that they never showed up again, because, like, other characters did.
Yeah, and it just kind of felt like they were there for the purpose of having a trans character.
Yeah.
And maybe that, I can't speak to the author's intentions, obviously, but, like, that's just kind of what it felt like as a reader. So that was really, like, my only beef with it.
Yeah.
Because I was at that point with the borough that they just ignored. I was like, fuck them! Fuck them!
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Yeah, so I think I gave it 4 stars as well. Yeah. I counted The City We Became for Tome Infinity and Beyond, read a book you're excited about. And for Fuckathon, read Fuck Gentrification.
And I read The City We Became for read sci-fi with fantastical, mythological, or retelling elements. And I considered some of the magical stuff in there to be fantastical. And then I read it for Fuckathon for Fuck Gentrification.
Alright, and then the last book that we both read was Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. And I actually listened to the audiobook of this one, which you didn't. She read the physical book.
Read it.
Let me look at who narrated the audiobook. They did a really good job. So this was narrated by Anne Flosnick. And it's about a young woman. She discovers that she is a powerful sorceress. She's trying to get the training she needs to save herself from her own father, who's also a sorcerer and wants to kill her and is a terrible, terrible man. And also kind of trying to change the whole destiny, because there's these the people her father is a part of. I can't remember the names of the 2 groups of people.
I can't either. I know one of them is the OKK people.
Yeah, the OKK is her mother is an OKK.
And I can't remember what her father is.
Yeah, and her father is part of another group of people, and they're kind of at war. And so her destiny is kind of to change
that. Yeah. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars, but then after I had given it 4 stars, and I kept thinking about it, and I went back and gave it 5 stars.
Really?
I loved this book.
Yeah. I gave it 4 stars. I do think that it's even though I do think the narrator of the audiobook did a great job, I think maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I had read it physically, just because I'm not an auditory learner, and I would sometimes find myself zoning out a little bit. But I still really very much enjoyed it.
So there's a lot of cool, like, magical realism elements in that book, which is really awesome. But then there's also a lot of, like, African mythology and, like, folklore type stuff in there, which I love, like, mythology and folklore in general. And I don't know anything about African mythology or folklore, so it was cool to read about it.
Yeah, and I also love when books kind of don't explicitly tell you that they're set in the future.
Yeah.
And you kind of, like, pick it up along the way. Like, the Chrysalids was like that, where I was like, this is set in the future, isn't it?
Hold up.
And this was kind of the same way, where you're like, oh.
It's like post-nuclear. Yeah. It's incredible. Like, it's a really, really good book.
Yeah, it's great. I definitely recommend. Also, bukus of content warnings
of rapey
on
rape.
This one,
like lots and lots of rape.
So I only counted Who Fears Death for one challenge for Fuckathon, and that was fuck slut shaming, because there's one character in particular here who's loves sex and is very unapologetic about it. But I feel like all the characters are, like, pretty.
Yeah, they're pretty open about it, and especially, like, they encounter a tribe of people in the desert who is, like, very open about sex.
Yeah.
They're like, what, we like to have sex, and, like, we like to enjoy each other. So.
Yeah, and it's kind of a hot subject in the book, because the three main female characters go through genital mutilation.
Yeah.
And that obviously affects their
sexuality
sex.
And their sex drive.
Yeah.
So I counted Who Fears Death for, again, quite a few things for Tome and Affinity. I counted it for read a book that you're excited about, read a book that's part of a series, read a disaster or dystopian novel, and then for Fuckathon, I counted it for fuck slut shaming.
Yeah, so those are the 4 books that we both read this month. So now we're going to talk about a few of the books that we each read separately.
Yes. So I read Rosewater by Tade Thompson. And this is a book about a town that is situated on the outskirts of an alien biodome. And the biodome opens periodically, and when it does, if you're close enough to the opening, people get healed and such. And so this is about a man who lives and works outside the biodome. He has a history of being like a government agent or whatever, and he still works with the government. The kind of like the government being, I mean, you know how governments are, trying to like destroy the biodome or like figure it out or whatever. And so it's about him trying to like make peace with both sides and kind of get it sorted. But
I hate that I can't hear the word biodome without thinking of Pauly Shore.
Oh no, that's a bad.
Remember the movie Biodome?
No, that's a bad connotation. No,
I mean,
ma'am.
I liked that movie when I was a kid. I haven't seen it since then, so I don't know. But
now all I can see is just like Pauly Shore in my head, and I'm picturing him as the main character in this book, and it's fucking with me.
What's your beef with Pauly Shore?
He's weird. I don't know. Like I don't know. But in this context of this book, if you imagine Pauly Shore as the main character, it fucks the book up a little bit.
Sorry. Even like Encino Man? Wasn't Pauly Shore in Encino Man?
I think so.
I loved Encino Man when I was a kid.
Oh God, I don't.
But also Brendan Fraser.
Brendan fucking Fraser. Yeah. Anyhoozle. So I liked this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was good. It wasn't my favorite book that I've read this month, but it was good. And there was a line in it where there's like a love interest for the main character, and he asks, like, something crazy happens to her, and so he asks another character, like, he's feeling guilty because it's like, well, was it because of me? And the other character was like, no, she's her own person and she has her own stuff going on that doesn't have anything to do with you. And I was like, yeah, that was like one of my favorite lines in the whole book, but I dug it. So I counted, we both made the same noise. I counted Rosewater for quite a few Tome Infinity and Beyond challenges. I counted it for read a book with a beautiful cover, because like those colors together and just like the way the font is just really appealing to me. I also read it for read a book set on Earth. Read the most popular sci-fi you own and haven't read, because I feel like it was popular for a minute. I don't know what's popular. And then I counted it for read a book with extraterrestrial beings.
One of the books, the first book I finished this month, wasn't actually for either of the readathons, but it was Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. And I had listened to this audiobook, and we actually talked about it in our last wrap-up video, because Megan read it last month, and I had actually finished it by the time we were filming. So we did discuss it there if you want to hear more about it. Yeah, it's a nonfiction about like the history of racism in the United States, and it's excellent. 5 stars. Like, I think everyone should read it.
Agree. Should be required reading for all white people. It's
for sure.
Really good. So the next book that I read was Severance by Ling Ma. And this is a like pandemic disaster type book, but in like a real chill, weird way. So it really was like 3 different tales in one. It's like part immigration story, part coming of age story, part apocalyptic pandemic story. So it really was an interesting book to read, and it was also like kind of heartbreaking. But it's about this woman who is working in Manhattan, I believe, somewhere in New York, and this global pandemic hits, and it kind of talks about the descent of the world into like the point where it's over, the world's over. But she works through the whole thing. She keeps getting up and going to work every day. But then interspliced into that is kind of her flashing back to growing up. She was born in China, and her growing up in America. And then interspliced with that is like her before the pandemic hit, coming of age, basically. Like her experience, like how did she get her job, her relationship. But then also, like, she eventually does have to leave Manhattan during the pandemic. So it's about her trying to survive after that. So it's so many different stories in one, and it's done really well to where it really doesn't feel disjointed at all. It flowed really well, but it kind of served to, like, build a fuller picture of what this woman was going through. And it was kind of, like, heartbreaking. Like, it's supposed to be satirical, but, like, it's heartbreaking. And also, like, even heartbreakinger, I'm gonna make that word now, is that it is like, so the whole idea of like this woman continuing to work up until the point where like it's very clear that humanity doesn't really exist anymore was so like darkly on point for like present times that it was just kind of like, fuck, man. Yeah. You know? But yeah, I really liked it. I gave it 4 to 5 stars, but not a light read. So I counted Severance for read a standalone for Tome Infinity. And then I also counted it for Fuck Capitalism for Fuckathon.
So the next book I read was Doomsday Book by Connie Willis. And this is... Incoming Murphy. So this is the first book in the Oxford Time Travel series, I think it's called. And it's set at Oxford, the university. But it's set in the near future, like the 2050s. And so Oxford has like a time travel program where they travel back to different periods in history, and so they can learn and observe history
as
in
it
real
happens.
time.
Yeah.
And this one student named Kivrin, she really wants to go back to the Dark Ages, to the 1300s. And so they reluctantly allow her to do that, and things go a bit awry. While she's in the Dark Ages, like trying to survive there, there's also a pandemic that has broken out in 2050.
Shit.
Which I wasn't expecting that. I actually didn't know this was like a pandemic novel. So I was like, there was a lot of stuff that was very appropriate. And in fact, there was like a part where this area in the UK, wherever Oxford is, I don't know.
Wherever.
Gets in lockdown. They're in lockdown basically.
Shit.
No one can leave. But there's a scene where like there's these Americans visiting and they're pissed because they can't leave. And they're like, well, we're from America where, you know, we have our freedom. And then the guy thinks in his head, and that's why 30 some, I don't know how many people, why 1 million people died during the pandemic in America. Because they reference like a pandemic that's already happened in the past. Because this isn't a pandemic actually, it's an epidemic or a whatever, because they contain it.
Right.
I feel like I'm just all over the place explaining this. But anyway, so we have simultaneously this like epidemic in England, plus the story of Kivrin, who's in the 1300s. I really enjoyed this. It was an interesting read, and I will probably pick up some more by Connie Willis. Yeah, it was a good book. I don't really know what else to say about it. Like it was interesting. I liked the characters.
What did you rate it, and what challenges did you count it for?
I gave it 4 stars, I do believe, and I counted it for Tome Infinity, read a book with time-based elements, like time travel, read a book that is over 500 pages, read a book that's been on your TBR for too long, because I owned this book for probably a few years.
Many months.
And then I ended up counting it for fuck ageism for Fuckathon, which I had originally picked something else for that because I didn't know this had a character that would count for fuck ageism. But one of the main characters in this is a man who is, I believe, in his 60s.
Okay, so next I read Survivor by the queen herself, Miss Octavia E. Butler. This novel is about a ship of missionaries that goes to this other planet to set up like a colony and spread the good word. And they encounter this alien race, and they're kind of like, the alien race is kind of warring tribe against tribe. And it's about this woman who is trying to make peace between her missionary colony and one tribe of this alien race. This is like Queen Octavia's like disowned novel. She didn't like it. I loved it. I mean, I liked it. I loved it. It's Octavia Butler. So I give it 4 out of 5 stars though, because compared to some of her other writing, I could see maybe how it didn't quite hold up to her usual standard, but even saying that, it was still very good, because it's Octavia Butler. And for Tome Infinity, I counted it for read a classic sci-fi book. I also counted it for read a book that's not talked about, read a sci-fi book that's been on your TBR for too long. I also counted it for Fuckathon, for fuck theological fundamentalism / religious intolerance, because the missionaries that she's a part of, she doesn't believe the same thing that they do, but they're very like fundamentalist Christian, and they believe that the humans were made in the image of God, and so this alien race who is like big and furry, they're not as good because they're not made in the image.
Right.
And so there's like a lot of theological fundamentalism in there. So
the next one I read was Midnight Robber by Nalo Hopkinson. This is set on like a Caribbean colonized planet. It's about a little girl who, she and her father end up getting exiled to this kind of like another dimension, sort of, or another world where like things of myth and legend are real. And also like the planet she lived on, her father was mayor, and they were like very affluent kind of, and they lived in luxury. And on this planet, this is the planet, oh no, my battery's dying.
I know.
This is the planet where they send criminals. So, and there's like no technology, no nothing, they just have to like live off the land. And she basically has to survive in this world. Her father's terrible. And she kind of becomes a thing of myth and legend herself. And I fucking loved this book.
Damn.
I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It was just, I loved all of the mythology. It was just fascinating to me, and I loved her story. I cried. It was just wonderful, I thought. And I counted this for the challenges for Tome Infinity, read a book with a beautiful cover. I love this cover. I even love it even more after reading it because I know what everything is on it now. I counted it for read a science fiction with fantastical mythology or retelling elements. And for Fuckathon, I read it for fuck theological fundamentalism / religious intolerance.
So the last book I'm going to talk about is A Time Traveler's Theory of Relativity by Nicole Valentine.
Someone's throwing a fit over here.
So Time Traveler's Theory of Relativity is a middle grade book about this boy. His twin sister dies when they're toddlers, and like all of the women in his family can time travel, and his mom has gone missing, and so he's trying to figure out like what the fuck is going on, like where did she go? I thought this was a really great book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Like if you have a kiddo or know a kiddo who is in that middle grade age group, like highly would recommend, especially if they're a kiddo who digs like sci-fi or science. It was a cool story. There was a lot of cool like positive themes in it. Yeah, I really dug it. I thought it was cute. For Tome Infinity, I counted it for read a book with time-based elements, and also read a children's or middle grade book.
And the last one I'm going to talk about in part 1 of our wrap-up is also a middle grade book, and it is The Giver by Lois Lowery. Yes, I'm the last person on the planet to read The Giver. Yeah, this was one of those books that was like really popular when I was a kid, and because I was a little shitty hipster, I was like, fuck that book.
Not gonna read it.
Probably sucks.
Not gonna read it.
And so I didn't read it. And it was really good. So I was an idiot. But this is about, it's like set in this dystopian community where everything's kind of the same. Everything's pleasant and there's no troubles. And the boy, the main character, gets chosen to be the giver. Is it called the giver? Mm-hmm. Or no, the receiver.
The receiver.
He gets chosen to be the receiver. So he has to receive all the memories of like what the world was like before their little perfect community came to be. It was really great. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend it. I also was like, this is for kids? Like, it was a little intense.
It's dark, man.
Yeah. I think my only beef with it is I do feel like there was some like problematic elements, like the whole if you have
ugly is bad.
Well, if you have pale eyes, you're like special and yeah. And then also, which I know this is the first in a series, but I was like kind of looking at the sequels and it didn't seem like they were about this character. But I'm like, I feel like they leave it a little up in the air about what happens to him.
Yeah, they totally do.
So, I don't know, maybe he comes back in one of the later books, I don't know.
I've not read any of the sequels.
But yeah, I did really enjoy it, and I counted it for Tome Infinity. Read a children's or middle grade book. Read a book that's part of a larger series. The most popular sci-fi book that you own and haven't read, which actually that's a lie because this is Megan's. I don't own this, so maybe I should count something else for that. But and then read a book with a disaster or dystopian. This is dystopian, and I don't think I counted it for anything for Fuckathon. And that's the end of part 1.
Woo! We read a lot this month, y'all.
This video is probably still going to be super long.
Super, super long.
So,
but yeah, I mean, lots of good books in it, and hopefully, I mean, our part 2 will be full of good books as well.
Yeah. This beer it's good.
It's
pretty good. It's good. It's not like a great IPA, but if you want like a low-cal IPA, it's decent. Decent, and it's very drinkable.
It is very drinkable. Yes, so thank you guys for watching. If you've read any of these books, let us know what you thought. Yeah, and I guess that's all for us, so we'll see you next time.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.